Hi, I'm Adam Summer. You're listening to the Yerushalmi Talk podcast with the support of the Yeshivat Devar Yerushalayim in Har Nof, Jerusalem. Welcome to Berechot, Chapter 1, Halacha 5. This is part 3 of the Shir. Today we're going to be covering the finer points of the Shemona Esrei prayer, and we're also going to be covering parts of the prayer to help you get deeper insight on what's going on in the Modim part of the prayer. The Modim part is the part that's the thanksgiving to Hashem. Now, there's a lot going on here. It's very rich with meaning. And one of the beautiful things about learning the Yerushalmi is that it'll give you ideas and the tradition from the sages in a way that does not contradict the Bavli in many cases, or most cases, but will give you extra information that you might not have known before. And this is really key because when you're doing the Shemona Esrei, you want to have more understanding so you can be more mindful of it. We don't want to be a mitzvah robot. We want to do it with more heart and more soul. And we want to really derive more meaning out of it. We want to do it with more kavanah. And we do it every day. We do it 3 times a day. We want to have more understanding of what each part means. And we're going to get into that today. We're also going to be getting into some finer points on the bowing, and that will help you. And also we're going to be getting into some of the finer points about together in this part of the Shemona Esrei with the Modim, so that you can understand it better. Now, one of the other key ideas is that we're going to be getting into and concluding the Shir with a start of how the prayers get constructed. So tomorrow, in the final part of Halacha 5, we're going to get into exceptions to the rules. But in the first part of what we're going to cover at the end of this, it's going to get into a basic system of format for you to be able to understand the brachas. So today we're really going to be getting into depth on the Shemona Esrei and the workings of it. Now, the Gemara is going to be starting off referring to this part in Kings where Shlomo HaMelech dedicates the temple and he dedicates the altar. And you have to keep in mind that the Bavli and the Yerushalmi Shas both have clues and sugyas that show that Shlomo HaMelech was passed on scrolls by King David. That King David had these scrolls that show what should be happening with the building of the temple and also other points on the temple service. Now, keep in mind that the initial inauguration in the Torah has a different set of festivities and also sacrifices than at any other time for regular avodah or regular sacrifices. And it's the same too with Shlomo HaMelech. There's a special way that he was bowing. And again, that's not something that we do today. This is reserved for a king, and not just a king. This is reserved for a king who's inaugurating the temple and the altar. So he had access to this very special information on how it should be done. And this is recorded here in the Yerushalmi so that one day when the king returns and the Mashiach returns, we'll be able to open this up and show him the posturing and the way it should work when he's dedicating the new altar and the new temple. So this tradition is being preserved here for a future time. Many times in Berechot in the Yerushalmi, it will be having things set out for when the Mashiach returns. And this is really one of those because the Mashiach is going to have the same kind of posture. This is a tradition from Shlomo HaMelech, and presumably this sort of posture and motion and movement was also done by Moshe Rabbeinu. That's why the scrolls were kept, so that we could pass on this information and really record it. Now, The passage in Kings 8 goes like this. It's in Pasuk 54. It says, "And it was when Shlomo had finished praying to Hashem this entire prayer and supplication, he stood up from having knelt on his knees before the altar of Hashem." Now, this passage is describing an extensive prayer for this inauguration, and it's obvious that this prayer is unique because the kneeling is using two different words for kneeling. You have keriah and you have bricha. And they want to understand, well, what's going to be bricha and what's going to be keriah, because these two different forms really show that there's two different motions going on here, and that, this again is something where a king should be very submissive, especially, until the end of prayer. And this is not something that we do today because none of us are kings. And, this is not really the same as even the king's everyday prayer. This is a special inauguration prayer that is at the temple. And again, we have evidence in both Shas's that there were scrolls that you can see in the Tanakh that were in the possession of David HaMelech in order for building and recording details of the temple. And presumably this very unusual thing that's recorded is also one of these systems of movements, because it's very, very particular. It's very particular. So what happens is the Gemara wants to know, because you have two words in here for kneeling, bricha and keriah. And the Gemara asks, it says, what form of kneeling is keriah and which form is bricha? And basically, both verses, says the Yafei Marah, the great commentator in Yerushalmi, pertain to Shlomo's mention of knees. So we know that keriah and bricha are forms of kneeling, but there must be a difference, says the Yafei Marah, as to regards to the body posture. So the Gemara wants to understand what's going on, and so you have great sages that were trying to figure out and demonstrate this posture. Now, keep in mind, these are not postures that are done on an everyday way, so maybe a person that's not used to doing it might find it hard to do it, or maybe these are older men at the time and maybe they're not in shape, like Shlomo HaMelech when he was much younger and in good shape when he dedicated the temple. The Gemara says like this, it doesn't really describe the form, but it wants to relate a story of what happened in Rebbe's Academy. And there's a parallel for this in the Bavli as well. And one day, the sages will be able to help the king be able to piece together to come up with the right way this posture should be done. Again, this is just for kings. Rabbi Chia the Great, says the Gemara, demonstrated bricha before Rebbe, and he became lame and was eventually healed. And Rabbi Levi Bar Sissi demonstrated keriah before Rebbe, and he became lame and he was not healed. So what the Yafei Marah is pointing out is that both keriah and bricha involve body movements that are difficult to do, and as such, Rabbi Chia and Rabbi Levi injured themselves in doing this. And a simpler reading of the Gemara would seem to indicate that keriah is the more difficult of the two, since that he didn't get healed. Because he didn't get healed, we see that perhaps this is a harder system of motion. So the Gemara is going to cite the end of the verse describing Shlomo HaMelech's special prayer and explain it. And the Gemara goes like this. It says, he stood up from having knelt on his knees before the altar of Hashem with his hands spread heavenward. And Rabbi Ivu said, when praying, Shlomo stood bent in the manner of an arthritic person. Now, this is an unusual word because this word here that's used in the Gemara is the term nakidim, which is referring to a type of gout called podagra, and that's a term from Greek origin, and it's an arthritic condition that really, really hurts and inflames and makes the hands and feet crooked. I don't know if you know anybody who has gout, but it really can become painful. And sometimes when you look at their feet, from the pain, the posture of the feet will become twisted. It's very hard to move your feet in a normal way. I know a very great sofer who's a really great rabbi. He was a student of the Beur Rebbe, and he studied in his yeshiva, and he has very bad gout, and he has a very hard time walking and moving when it flares up. Now, when you look at somebody with this kind of gout, the feet sort of turn inward, and you can see there's a hobbled motion to it, and so this system of being arthritic, says the Pnei Moshe, is not that. It's not just that the hands can have this impairment, but also the feet can as well. And the Pnei Moshe says that with this posture, Shlomo HaMelech demonstrated great humility before Hashem at this inauguration of the altar, and that his hands lacked the mobility to transgress any of Hashem's commandments. In other words, that just like you have a person having severe arthritis or gout, and they'll have limited mobility in their limbs, that basically what Rabbi Ivu means is that when Shlomo HaMelech's hands were spread heavenward, they were not spread wide like you would have for a healthy person, but they were spread slightly, like an arthritic person would be if they had their arthritis or gout flaring up. And that's a particular thing, says the Pnei Moshe, to show that this lack of mobility with the hands is showing that it's a diminishment of the ability to transgress any of Hashem's commandments. And in fact, the deeper point about this is that at the dedication, it really is for the Jewish people, not just the king, not just Shlomo HaMelech, but the Jewish people, to have this impairment to be able to transgress and to make sins, because we have a system of an altar, and we have a culture of Jews going to the altar to make atonement, and we have a very visible system to do it. And so it's like a fence that helps to keep us away from sins. In other words, it's like protecting our hands, where there's not it's not so easy to go and to transgress, use your hands to go transgress Hashem's commandments. And so not only says the Yafei Marah that his hands were bent, and that the kneeling is going to be submissive, but that in fact the feet are as well, and that's to show that another idea of limited mobility, to be able to rush toward committing sin. The Jewish people are going to have a harder time rushing to go commit sin now, because they have the altar and they have the temple, and these things are going to happen again. And that's why it's very important for when the king returns and the Mashiach rebuilds the temple, to be able to recreate this, because this is a deep and important part of the dedication of the temple, because there's a lot of symbolism that future scholars and students and people will be able to look at for doing the mitzvot. So since you have kneeling, says the Yafei Marah, and since kneeling submissively is incompatible with raising and spreading hands fully, Rabbi Ivu interprets the verse to mean that Shlomo neither knelt completely nor kept his hands, nor spread his hands completely, but like an arthritic person, crouched humbly with the hands raised slightly. And so that you have these sort of like crooked feet and this sort of bent posture, and the hands are being raised slightly, and this unusual thing is there and filled with meaning at the dedication, and it's there as a clue to the king when he returns. Now, and he will return. Now, there's another explanation about this. Rabbi Elazar bar Avina said Shlomo HaMelech spread his hands wide to demonstrate figuratively that his hands were like these hands that are wide, open, and empty, for they did not derive even one drop of personal benefit in the course of building the Holy Temple. Now, the Pnei Moshe, the great commentator on the Yerushalmi, says that having just inaugurated the temple, Shlomo HaMelech communicated to the assembly that he kept his trust and he did not benefit an iota from the vast treasuries that his father David left aside for the construction of the temple. And the Yafei Marah points out that according to Rabbi Elazar bar Avina, the verse means that Shlomo HaMelech's hands were actually spread wide at this time, but this was not while he prayed. Rather, he prayed in a kneeling position, and then he stood up and he spread his hands to show they were empty. Now, this parallels Shlomo HaMelech over here with not benefiting personally, also to the building of the Mishkan with Moshe Rabbeinu. Moshe Rabbeinu also did not personally benefit at all, not one iota, from any of the contributions that went to the Mishkan. And so this must have been a motion that Moshe Rabbeinu had. And again, we know from both Shas's that point out from the Tanakh and reinforced by the oral tradition that King David had these scrolls that talk about all these things about building the temple, and it was passed down since Moshe on what the future temple would be, and that presumably just like Moshe Rabbeinu must have done this also at the dedication of the Mishkan, and Shlomo HaMelech is doing these very different motions and movements as king and as the dedicator of the temple and the altar. And so that these motions and movements must have been recorded, and we have evidence that these things were recorded in the Brisas, and that they point out that in the Tanakh itself, you can see once they point it out in the Mikra that yes, they did have these scrolls. So these unique motions are recorded for what's coming, and may it be soon. Anyway, the Gemara now is going to get into the laws of the Modim blessing. And you're going to see amazing ideas in the Modim that perhaps you didn't realize. Now, I want to just be real quick on one of the halachas. In basic Shemona Esrei, you have the Modim, that's the Thanksgiving prayer. And let's say you're late to a shul. The halacha is like this. As long as the shliach sibor, that's the person who recites the prayers, who's leading the praying, as long as he did not yet get to Modim, where we say thank you in the recitation of Shemona Esrei, you're allowed to join that minyan. You're allowed to join that minyan, be counted as part of the minyan. Your prayers will be counted, and that even if you started later than that, you're allowed to finish. You don't need to rush, because you're counted in there, okay? So if you arrive after they've started the Modim, then you have to go wait for another minyan. Anyway, that's just a basic thing, but there's a lot of reason why the Modim is so special, and we're going to get into that. There's Gemara. The Gemara says, Rabbi Halafta ben Shaul taught a brisa, all members of the congregation bow with the emissary of the congregation upon the recitation of the Modim when he repeats the Shemona Esrei. Now, it's going to use this statement, emissary of the congregation. That only means the Shliach Sibor, that's the leader of it. And this ruling is going to get clarified. Now, that point is correct. Okay, so all members do bow when that part is said. The Shliach Sibor does, and you do too. And the ruling gets clarified. Rabbi Zera says, but they bow only upon his recitation of the word Modim, at the beginning of the blessing. So the Beit Yosef and the Or HaChaim, by the way, in 127.1, in Safe 1, goes over all the details of being a Shliach Tzibor, all the details of being able to pray Shemona Esrei and to do it successfully. And this ruling is going to get clarified and qualified. Rabbi Zera says, but they bow only upon his recitation of the word Modim, and that's at the beginning of the blessing. Now, some people might get confused and misunderstand parts of when you're bowing. Maybe they'll think you have to bow twice. And so it's going to clarify this so that you as the listener can get it right and that you will understand why you're doing it the way you're doing it and how to do it. So it's going to show you the right motion and the right movement. Now, as a general rule, if you want to learn more about so that you can be a Shliach Tzibor or that you can get more about how the function of your Shemona Esrei works and the halachas for that, you could check out the Or HaChaim in 127 Safe 1. Anyway, so the Gemara is meaning that when the Shliach Tzibor bows and says Modim, which is a statement of, that literally means we thank you, the people bow along with him. And they straighten up and they do not bow again at the end of the blessing when he says, blessed are you, Hashem, the good one, and the good one is your name, and as to you it is fitting to give thanks. That's when the Shliach Tzibor repeats it. He bows again there. Now, it's pointing out that you bow one time, and you don't copy the Shliach Tzibor and bow a second time. That's just for them, and that's not for you. So that's just a finer point. And there's no contradiction between Rabbi Chalafta ben Shul and Rabbi Zera. He's just pointing out a finer point. Now, the next Gemara that's coming up is going to be a little bit confusing because the Vilna Goan, the Haredim, and a couple of the other Meforshim are going to point out that the next Rabbi Zera that's being spoken about is not the same Rabbi Zera in this Baraisa here, in this ruling. Okay, so you have, as very common in the Yerushalmi, you have two different people, and in fact they're right next to each other, but they're two different people with the same name. We had a case of that before in Berechot, where we had the Amara Rabbi Yossi commenting on the Tana Rabbi Yossi, and it was a conversation where, not a conversation, but clarifications back and forth between Rabbi Yossi and Rabbi Yossi. This is a kind of a case like that, where you have the Rabbi Zera, and now you just have a Rabbi Zera. Both are great Torah masters, and great masters and of the oral law, but this is a slightly different one. Now, there's going to be a clarification showing what somebody did. This Rabbi Zera was acting more stringently, and the Gemara is going to cite his practice. And just so that you know, you can't just read this, these Gemaras and then go do this stuff yourself. You have to follow the congregation. You have to follow the community that you're in. A lot of these things are reserved just for people at that day, 2,000 years ago, where they were more strict on themselves, but they knew more, they learned more, they understood the finer points and nuances of these halachot better, and it's not really appropriate for us to do this stuff today. We're not at that level, but nonetheless, it's still recorded here. So this other Rabbi Zera, again, this is reinforced by the Beur, by the Vilna Goan, who explains this is actually someone else. Rabbi Zera, when reciting the rabbi's Modim, that's the rabbi's recitation, not his part of the Shemona Esrei, not the individual part, but the part that gets recited. Rabbi Zera, when reciting the rabbi's Modim, would in fact wait for the emissary of the congregation, that's the Shliach Tzibor, and he would prolong his recitation of the rabbi's Modim so as to complete it only when the emissary of the congregation finished the regular Modim. And the Gemara continues and says, in order to be able to bow with the emissary of the congregation at both the beginning and the end of the blessing. So, again, this is for an Amorah who is being strict on himself. You can't do this today. This is not the custom. Nobody does this. And this master understood things that perhaps we don't understand today. I want to give you some explanation of what's going on here, just so that you can see what's going on. So the Beit Yosef is explaining that Rabbi Zera is not the same Rabbi Zera who stated the previous teaching. So that's another commentator who's saying that this is a different one. Rather, Rabbi Zera holds that one is not required to bow with the Shliach Tzibor at the end of the Modim blessing, but this Rabbi Zera acted more stringently and timed his own final bowing to coincide with the Shliach Tzibor's. And just the Beit Yosef states that the Halacha follows the first Rabbi Zera and not this Rabbi Zera. So this is not how we do it today. This was a person who's being strict on himself, and basically what was happening was that he would time it where he was still bowed until the Shliach Tzibor said his thing, and then he got up. And basically, I think what he's trying to do is he's trying to praise Hashem by getting up in a certain way at a certain time. But we're going to get into the formulation that we have today, which is going to be by Rav and Shmuel. They both agree. And we're going to see the finer point of what's going on today when you're getting up, and the finer point of how you should be thinking about it when you do get up, so that you can get the most out of your Shmona Esrei to help you get your prayers answered better. It helps you also to be more mindful of what you're doing. You can do this with more understanding, which is always important. Now, the Gemara is going to cite an incident pertaining to the recitation of the rabbi's Modim. Now, this is a very special story, and we're going to go through it, and keep this in mind because a lot's going to happen until we understand the context of it. So, Rabbi Yasa, when he ascended here, in other words, he came to Eretz Yisrael from Bavel. He observed the congregation bowing and murmuring along with the emissary of the congregation when he recited Modim. And he said to them, "What is this text you are murmuring?" And the Gemara expresses wonder at this question. And the Gemara asks, it says, did he not hear that which Rabbi Chelbo said? Okay, so here's what happened. Okay, Rabbi Yasa indicates that obviously he's unaware of the rule about what was cited in the name of Rabbi Helbo, and that the Shliach Tzibor is saying all this extra stuff, and the congregation is actually saying all this stuff with the Shliach Tzibor at the rabbi's Modim when the recitation happens. And obviously they didn't have this back in Bavel. Obviously they came to Eretz Yisrael, and he saw something very different from how the super religious and the sages there were doing it. So the Gemara is now going to explain what Rabbi Helbo's teaching was, so that you can get a context. Now, this Gemara that's coming up is going to cite Rabbi Helbo's version of the Rabbi's Modim, and then this is going to give a lot of versions of the Thanksgiving prayer. And then, only after reciting all these versions, it's going to resolve this question of how Rabbi Yasa could have asked what the congregation is murmuring. It's going to bring it back right at the end so you get the full flavor of it. But keep in mind that the sages do have the power to shorten prayers. One of the reasons why they would shorten a prayer is that if it's too long for the generation of the time, perhaps not everybody could observe it, or perhaps not everybody's pious enough to observe it, they're allowed to alter it. Now, the Bavli version is going to give the version that we have today. And this version that the Yerushalmi is going to give is not in the Bavli, and it's going to give finer points. Now, the shortened prayer, as you're going to see, really is a statement of the longer form of what's coming up. But right now, you're going to get an idea, and you're going to get this revelation of what is this longer form that we have, or that it came from. We have the shortened version today, but now you're going to see what the longer version is. And again, that the halacha is that you don't want to delay the community and the congregation like for prayer and things like that. And if you're living in a time that perhaps you're in exile, perhaps things are not necessarily in the best state for Judaism, doing this kind of longer prayer that Rabbi Yassa was witnessing is not very practical. So yes, they do have the power to shorten it. And here's what happened. So Rabbi Chelbo said, Rabbi Shimon reporting in the name of Rabbi Yochanan, reporting in the name of Rabbi Yirmiyah, and Rabbi Hanina reporting in the name of Rabbi Mayasha, and Rabbi Hiya reporting in the name of Rabbi Simai. And some say it was an anonymous scholar reporting in the name of Rabbi Simai. And they all said that when the emissary of the congregation, that's the Shliach Sibor, recites Modim, the congregation recites the following text. Now, I want you to look at this for a second, because what this is showing a chain of transmission. This is showing that something very amazing. First of all, this is showing something that Judaism has, where we have a chain in the tradition that masters will pass these things on to students. And by the way, that's why it's so important to study Gemara and to cling to Gemara scholars, because they're delving into these traditions and they're sharing them with you, so you can see what our ancestors were doing. Now, this must have been an even older tradition, because this is something that could have gone way back and got shortened later. One of the amazing things that you can see here is that you can see that basically the prayers that we have today are ancient. And so any of the people who have these fantasies of changing Judaism and modifying Judaism, it's very foolish. You have things that are ancient that have been created by the Gedolim of the day, and you can really connect to something very spiritual and elevate yourself. So that's why you really want to resist any temptation to make any change to the Haredi practice of Judaism. You want to run away from modern orthodoxy. You want to run away from conservadoxy and all these other oxys that are strange, and you want to really cling to what is the real tradition here. And this is it. This is recorded. And here's what they were saying. Here's what they said in the Modim blessing. They said, "We thank you, Master of all creatures, God of praises, Rock of the worlds, Life of eternity, Molder of creation, Resuscitator of the dead, for your having kept us alive and sustained us, and having given us the merit, assisted us, and drawn us near to graciously thank your name. Blessed are you, Hashem, God of thanksgivings." Now, put on your seatbelt, put on your helmet, because check out this explanation. The Iyun Tefillah says that this is literally an expression of the word Berechot, which is in the beginning. And just like the beginning word of Berechot is describing the process of creation, it is a reference also to everything that came into being through that process of creation. Now, we know that we always have to cleave to Hashem, and we always have to thank Hashem for his goodness, and that's why the Modim is so important. We want to be grateful. But the recitation that we have today is a remez of this longer form, and in fact, it's going to get longer, by the way. But this is part of what was said, and this basically is a literal statement of the word Bereshit. And Bereshit, by the way, is a word that has bracha in it because has this strange gematria where it grows and grows, okay? And bracha has this characteristic, and so does Bereshit. And by the way, so does bricha. So all of this stuff, when you're bowing and you're thanking Hashem, and you're doing bricha, which is where you're bending your knees and bowing, and you're saying this bracha, you're also doing it where it connects to Bereshit. And that, by the way, has they all three are synchronized at the precise time. This bricha, this bracha, and this concept of Bereshit at when you're bowing down at the recitation of the Modim. And so the idea here is, and let me reread it again. It says, "We thank you, Master of all creatures, God of praises, Rock of worlds, Life of eternity, Molder of creation, Resuscitator of the dead." Now, these are all statements about, from Bereshit, and it's referring to everything that came into being through that process of Bereshit. That's a really big wow. That's really amazing. And it really shows the depth of Judaism. It really shows the depth of something beautiful and profound. And you can see something that, yes, this was articulated and written down by Ezra. And this is written down by, the prophets and formulated by the men of the Great Assembly. And there's something very special about this. And so, yes, the version that you use today is containing this implicitly, although it's harder to see if you don't know it. But now that you know this and you know what you're saying, this is it. And I like the idea that this, these three B's are all synchronized. You have the Bereshit in the statement of this. You have the bricha, which is the bending of it, and then you have the bracha, because you are getting bracha from praying. And all of these have this generative aspect and quality to those words, and it's all being pulled together and synchronized at this precise time. And it's really important because if you're counting, if you know about these sugyas about how the Shemona Esrei is synchronized to word count and letter count, that there's a lot going on with the gematrias for that. That's why you should always resist any temptation to add any kinds of prayers in there, except at the parts that's designated by the Gedolim. You always follow your prayer book because you don't want to tamper with the Shemona Esrei. It's very precisely calibrated. So the Gemara is now going to give another version of this text that was accompanying Modim. Rabbi Ba Bar Zavda reported the following in the name of Rav. And so this is coming from Rav. And the Gemara says, "We thank you that we are obligated to give thanks to your name. My lips shall rejoice when I sing to you, as well as my soul, which you have redeemed. Blessed are you, Hashem, God of thanksgivings." This is coming from, this is going to be coming from verses in Tehillim, in Tehillim 71. And basically, this is expressing, joy at the ability to sing to Hashem and to say thank you. And there's another version that's coming up. Rabbi Shmuel Bar Mina reported the following text in the name of Rabbi Acha. And it says, "Thanksgiving and praise to your name. Yours is greatness, yours is strength, yours is splendor. May it be the will before you, Hashem, our God and God of our forefathers, that you support us in rising from our fallen state and straighten us up from our bent state. For you are the one who supports the fallen." Now, that's going to be coming from Chronicles in part 1 in 29. And then actually there's going to be a part that's coming up that's going to be from the rest of it. And it says, "And straightens up the bent and is full of mercy, and there is none besides you. Blessed are you, Hashem, God of thanksgiving. And then you have the version of Bar Kapara, which says the following text, and it goes and continues more on Chronicles 1:29. And Bar Kapara's version says, to you, Kariah, which is kneeling, to you, bending, which actually is written in the word bricha. So one version is using the word Kariah, which we were just talking about as one type of bending, and then is talking about the next type, which is bricha, which, by the way, you're doing when you're doing bricha when you're bowing your knees. You're doing bricha when you're doing the recitation of the Modim, or you're bowing in your own individual Modim and doing bricha, you're bowing. So it continues, and it says, to you, prostrating to you, bricha, for to you shall every knee, every tongue swear. Yours, Hashem, is the greatness, the strength, the splendor, the triumph, and the glory, even everything in heaven and on earth. Yours, Hashem, is the kingdom. Yours, Hashem, is the kingdom and the sovereignty over every leader. Wealth and honor come from you, and you rule everything. In your hand is power and strength, and it is in your hand to make anyone great or strong. So now, our God, we thank you and praise your splendorous name. With the entire heart and the entire soul, we prostrate ourselves. All my limbs will say, Hashem, who is like you, deliverer of the poor from the one mightier than he, of the poor and destitute from the one who robs him. Blessed are you, Hashem, God of thanksgiving. Now, that is quite a mouthful. That's a lot of amazing brachas and blessings, and part of it, by the way, has from Yeshayahu, part of it comes from Chronicles, part of it's going to come from Tehillim, and the question gets back to Rabbi Yassa. Rabbi Yassa, was aware of at least one of these texts reported by the rabbis, so he's wondering what was the murmuring that was going on when he came to Eretz Yisrael during the Modim, and here's the answer. Rabbi Yudan said the rabbis adopted the custom of saying a combination of all these texts. In other words, that they would combine the various portions of all of these texts and they'd form it into one lengthy one. And so what Rabbi Yassa was unaware of was that the custom of the people in Eretz Yisrael was to take all of this, and this was all said at the recitation, and that's why he was unaware of it. He was aware of one of the versions of the text, but he wasn't aware that this custom, they would take all these versions of the text and use them. Now, again, when you say the shortened version, which is the Bavli version, you're saying all of this. All of this is implicit and hinted at and is a remez of this. And yes, you are also saying something that's a statement of Berechot. When you're thanking Hashem, you're connecting to the everything that came into being through that process of creation. And that's a very important thing to keep in mind. Now, the Gemara is going to continue and it's going to say that, but some say that it is proper to recite either this one or that one and not a combination of the texts. So, again, these are talking about customs. And so Rabbi Yassa basically is following the later practice and reciting, only one of these texts. But when he came to Eretz Yisrael, he observed the congregation murmuring for much longer than it would take to recite that text. And since he was unaware of their custom to combine all the texts together, he wondered what they were murmuring. That's basically what happened, but it's to show you the spiritual level of the Jews living in Eretz Yisrael at the time. And it's also to show you, when you're praying today in Modim, what does it actually mean? When you're saying thank you, what are you actually saying? And this is a clue as to what you're actually, saying. You're trying to point out that, yes, wealth and honor come from Hashem, And that's really a statement of Emunah and Bitachon, and it's a statement that Hashem rules everything, and that Hashem can make anybody great or strong, and we're thanking Hashem and we're praising Hashem, and that's really what it is. And so it's thanking Hashem for maybe you were down and out in your life and you got lifted up, and you got to thank Hashem for everything, because that's also a key mystically in Judaism to get your prayers answered, because the halacha is that if somebody is no longer grateful for being helped, you no longer have an obligation to help that person anymore. So, if you're not going to be grateful to Hashem, it's a very bad quality. It's a very bad trait. So, did you get a new apartment? Thank Hashem. Did you get a new, a new outfit? Thank Hashem. Did you get new shoes? Thank Hashem. Did you get a good wife? Thank Hashem. Did you get good kids? Thank Hashem. Whatever you can thank Hashem for, you got to thank Hashem. You got to be grateful. You got to try to look at your life, especially 3 times a day when you're doing this, and you're trying to connect to Hashem's greatness and strength and splendor, and how everything is available to you on earth, and that you can connect to it, and that Hashem's is the kingdom, and you can connect to something and climb up the ladder of holiness, and this is available to every single Jew. You can do it, and you don't realize how lucky you are to be made a Jew, that you have access to this. So the Gemara now is going to give you a clue to help you be able to get your prayers answered better, and it's going to teach you the right kind of posture when you're bowing, because it wants you to know that. It wants, Hashem wants you to have your prayers answered. Hashem wants you to connect and to have closeness and to feel connected with your prayers. And it's like a computer program. What you don't see is the machine code that's running behind this system. It's like a very advanced computer program. And so certain things have to happen in order to make everything, function in the right way. And if you don't do it right, you don't do it right. So this is part of this machine code to help you to get your prayers answered right. And, you're going to see that it's connected to using your posture in a humble way and trying to soften your heart and get you used to softening your heart and to circumcise your heart and to help to make you into a mensch. So here's some of the clues on helping to understand the posture. It was taught in a brisa as the Gemara, but it was stipulated that one should not bow down exceedingly. Now, the Rambam says in Hilchos Tefillah, chapter 9, Halacha 4, says that this means that when bowing with the Shliach Sibor, the members of the congregation should not bow fully as they do when saying Modim in their own prayers. Rather, they should bow slightly. Thus, the Shliach Sibor bows fully, for he is reciting the Shemona Esrei, but the congregation bows slightly. So that's a finer point. If you want to learn more about how to pray and how to do the posture right, please check out the Rambam in Hilchos Tefillah, chapter 9. And you can also check out the Or Chaim in 127. And that's going to walk you through all the details on how to do it so you can get your prayers answered. Now, here's a few fine points of what's going on here by the Beit Yosef. He's saying that the reason the congregation should not bow fully is that the sages actually required a person to bow only when reciting his own Shemona Esrei. And as we learned above, one is not supposed to add to the required bowings. In other words, you're not supposed to bow too much because it's arrogant. Or it's something that's reserved for a Kohen Gadol or a king, and you're not a Kohen Gadol and you're not a king. So it's not appropriate for you to do it. The Beit Yosef continues. He says, on the other hand, it would be improper for the congregation not to bow at all when the Shliach Sibor says Modim and bows, and this might create the impression that they deny any kind of indebtedness to the Holy One who we're giving thanks to. So the Beit Yosef says that the correct approach, therefore, is to bow slightly, and this demonstrates their participation in the Shliach Tzibor's thanksgiving, but it does not constitute an actual addition to the required bowing. So that's the finer point of how you do it and to try to understand it. Now, there's another explanation about this. The Tosafot in the Bavli parallel in 12b is explaining that the parallel in the Bavli means that whenever one bows, he should not bow down extremely to the point that his mouth is level to his waist. And the reason is that this kind of bowing in a manner that exceeds that which is required in the normal practice smacks of arrogance and haughtiness. And according to that approach, when one bows with a congregation of Modim, he should bow to the same extent that he does during the Shmona Esrei. That, by the way, would be if you were the Shliach Tzibor, you should bow the same amount as you do during the Shmona Esrei. You shouldn't bow more when you're doing it. But again, one of the things for you to keep in mind is you're not supposed to bow so much that it looks arrogant or haughty, and also you want to match the community that you're in, because the community that you're in has a tradition, and the tradition, as you can see here, is ancient, and you don't want to do something that's out of step with what we have, because people are going to look at you like a weirdo. You don't want to be a weirdo, right? You don't want to stand out, and you want your prayers answered. You don't want Hashem saying, "Who's this arrogant guy coming and praying to me?" You don't want that. You want Hashem to see you in your best light. So anyway, that's one of the finer points about it. And now they're going to give you more clarification on it. And the Gemara says like this: Rabbi Yerushalmi said, on the other hand, it is stipulated that one should not act in the manner of a ferret, which bows its body but keeps its head straight. Rather, the correct way is one should bow his head in accordance with the verse, "All my limbs will say, Hashem, who is like you." So this is trying to get sort of the finer points of how to move when you're bowing, so you have the right sort of posture. And again, you're doing the praying, do it right, because again, I don't know what you're praying for, but you're adding something to your prayer and you hope it gets answered. So come with your best foot forward. Come and do it this way. Anyway, the ferret is like a weasel, and it walks very low to the ground, and because its head is low to the ground, its head is erect. So you're trying to bow the head and not try to bow, but you're keeping your head up. That's you don't want to be like a ferret, where you're bowing like low, but your head is still up. Okay, basically, it's equating the neck like a limb, and it's saying that your head should also be bowing as part of it. Sometimes you'll see people bowing, and they'll bow their back, but their head is still up, their eyes are still level. That's not what this says. Again, you don't want to be arrogant, especially to Hashem, because again, you want to have a better life, you want to have your prayers answered, you want to do something that matters. So 3 times a day, bow your head like that. Anyway, so the Tehillim in 35 is saying all my limbs, and that includes the head. That's what the Pnei Moshe says. He's basically saying that the head is included there, and that all the limbs, says the Pnei Moshe, refers to the vertebrae of the spine, and the Haredim says that the spine constitutes the greatest part of the skeleton, but the spine will not bend in its entirety unless the head is bowed. So we automatically learn from the verse that the correct way is you're also supposed to bow your head, because it gets your spine to come up with the right kind of posture. And again, there's a tradition going on here. They were bowing then for Shmona Esrei, and they're trying to teach you how it was done then so that you can do it right and you can pass it on to the next generation as well. This is the tradition. So how lucky are we that this is recorded here, and how lucky are we that we're learning how to do it? So there's going to be a different opinion with disagreement. So there's going to be another explanation here, and the opinion of Rabbi Hanan Barba is in disagreement. For Rabbi Hanan Barba said to the scholars, sorry, let me reread this. The opinion of Hanan Barba is in disagreement. For Hanan Barba said to the scholars in the study hall. Now, Hanan Barba doesn't have the title of Rav or Rebbe. Okay, he's not either from Bavel or from Eretz Yisrael in the status of being a gadol or a sage or an Amarah or anything. He's just a guy who's, I guess, very religious. By the way, he doesn't have the title of Mar in front of his name, so he's not considered, one of the saints or a particularly pious person. This is a person who, nonetheless, is still a witness, and so he's gonna give a detail to something he saw. So that's a bit about what's going on. Gemara says, "Let me tell you a fine thing that I observed Rav doing, and I related it before Shmuel, and he arose and kissed me on my mouth." And it says, when praying the Shemona Esrei and arriving at the blessings at which one bows, upon saying, "Blessed are you," Rav would bow, and then when he came to mention the name, he would straighten up before uttering it. And Shmuel said, "I will state the basis for this practice. It is the verse, Hashem, the name, straightens the bent." So this is an indication of the right way to do it. Definitely, this is something that Rav and Shmuel agree upon. So that's something to keep note of, and that this is something that you're allowed to do today, and that keep in mind that this is referring to something from Tehillim 146 pasuk 8, where it's saying that the standing straight is to demonstrate the honor for the name of Hashem. And so basically what's happening is that he's bowing in this way where yes, the neck is going down, the head is bowing, and then at the timing of when it comes to when they're saying the name, just before that he straightens up, and his body then fulfills this verse, which is saying that that Hashem straightens the bent, and this is actually a blessing to Hashem, and so that he's getting basically two blessings for the price of one. Basically, he's blessing, and he's bowing to Hashem and doing a blessing and respectful blessing when he's bowing, and then right before, to fulfill this verse, he straightens up before they utter the name, and that standing up at that point to be straight is honoring the part that says Hashem, the name, straightens the bent. And that's the right way to do it even today. That's the right way you should be doing it. And so in there you're getting really two blessings. That's really the key point in here. By the way, this doesn't disagree with what we were talking about with trying to get the vertebrae of the back to bend and trying to get the head to bend to be more humble, because you're going to get the right kind of bend of the vertebrae. You want to get the right kind of bend, and you can't get the right kind of bend of the vertebrae if your head is still up while you're bowing. It doesn't work. So, and certainly it doesn't match the tradition. But what this does record is this records basically, this is not a case of Rav finishing and being done with the bow. This is not what's happening. He is done with it, but he's doing the second part of it, which is that when he straightens, there's also a blessing to Hashem implicit in the straightening, and that's done with intention and kavana, and it's done mindfully. And you can do that too. Instead of just being done with your bow, you can straighten up at the same time and then turn it into where that getting up is now a blessing also. You're not just done with the motion one time, you're really doing it a second time. So we always like deals where you're getting 2 for 1. This is a 2 for 1. So Rav's practice is going to get challenged. By the way, what Rav said is, Shmuel agrees with it. But this is going to be a rabbi who is an Amora, who has a different tradition. And Rav Ami said, this is not reasonable. Rather, it seems preferable to act in accordance with the verse, he was humbled before my name, which is implying that one should be in a humble stance and bowed, basically, when reciting the name. So that's going to be a reference from Malachi chapter 2, Pasuk 5. And that's going to be rejected. Rabbi Avin said, if the verse had been written, he was humbled at my name, you would be correct, for that would indeed imply that one should be bowed while saying the name. But actually, what is written is nothing other than he was humbled before my name, which implies before mentioning the name of Hashem, he was humbled and bowed, but when actually uttering the name, he is upright. So the really what this is trying to point out is that you shouldn't stay bowed. The right way is not to stay bowed even up until after the name of Hashem is said. Really, you should be doing it like the way that Rav and Shmuel say it and endorse it, which is you bow, and then right before the name, you stand up straight, and you're doing that with the intention that it's not just that you're done, but that standing straight is also coinciding with another blessing to Hashem. How amazing is that? We do this every day, do it 3 times a day, and look at all the details that are in here. And right here in the oral law, it's showing you the best way to do it because, again, you want to get your prayers answered. And there's a lot going on here in the motion so that you can get your prayers answered too. Gemara now wants to talk about the other problem of bowing too much. Before it was saying, maybe not bowing enough with the right kind of posture because you weren't putting your head down and maybe your spine wasn't bending enough. There's going to be Gemaras coming up about how much the bend should be in the vertebrae, and that it should be like where you could feel each part of the vertebrae popping out. So that's pretty deep, but not too deep. And that can only come when the head is bowed. Now, the Gemara is going to get into what happens when somebody's bowing too much, which we've already learned is no good. So Rabbi Shmuel bar Nasan said in the name of Rabbi Chama bar Hanina, there was an incident with a certain individual who bowed exceedingly while praying as the Shliach Tzibor of the community, and Rebbe dismissed him from the post. So really, this is why would Rebbe be doing this? This gets back to what we were talking about, that Rebbe made an example of him because if Rebbe is there and he doesn't do anything, that could be like he's endorsing this like the way it should be. So Rebbe made a very public act to stop this because basically this overly done bow is haughty and arrogant, and it doesn't look good, and it's in fact not the tradition. So Rebbe has a responsibility because had he left it alone, people could have said that, oh, this is also part of the tradition, or this is also acceptable, and it would have confused the people. You're not allowed to put a stumbling block in front of the blind, and you're not allowed to confuse the people. So that's why he was dismissed from the post, but also because he was wrong. That's actually not what the case is. So in your own personal prayer, don't pray too much. Don't bow too much. Don't bend over exceedingly. So the Gemara is going to get into another version of this, and it's going to say that Rabbi Ami said Rabbi Yochanan would dismiss any Shliach Tzibor who bowed exceedingly, And Rabbi Chia bar Ba said to Rabbi Ami, Rabbi Yochanan would not dismiss him, but would rebuke him sharply. So, in any case, it's not good to do where you're bowing too much. I think what this is showing is that Rebbe, who is seeing this private individual bowing too deeply. If he saw the Shliach Tzibor bowing too deeply, he would dismiss him. But I think what this is saying is that if Rebbe had seen a private individual who's part of the minyan bowing too deeply, he would have also rebuked him. Since it was the Shliach Tzibor, he had to dismiss him because the Shliach Tzibor has a semi-public role, and it might influence or sway the people. According to the Rambam, the Gemara is referring to all people, not just the Shliach Tzibor. So that's a different take. In any case, whichever way you want to try to interpret this, it doesn't necessarily have to disagree. And definitely everybody's agreeing that it's not done where you bow too much. So that's the takeaway. And so be careful to bow where your vertebrae are going down and your head is just sort of curling over and drooping down so that it can get all the vertebrae to go into the right alignment so that you're copying the tradition the way it's done, and so that all your limbs are coming to thank and praise Hashem. So the Gemara is going to get back to the laws of blessing in general, and then we're going to be finishing up. So now what it's going to do, it's going to talk about blessings in general, where it's going to teach you how blessings in general are structured. Because, you say them every day, and you look at them every day, but it's going to show you how it is. Now, one of the amazing things about this is that you can open up your prayer book, and you're going to see the same structure of blessings as here 2,000 years ago. So that's really remarkable, and that's why it's so important to want to, really be in the side of Am Yisrael that wants to keep the tradition intact and wants to resist, any attempts to try to modernize and tamper and exchange this. This is the tradition, and we have it recorded here. Just leave it alone. But it wants to teach you what it is, and it wants to teach you how it works, and it wants to teach you the logic of why it is the way it is. Why is it like that? And so now it's going to show us. So here's how it works. The Gemara says, which are the blessings that begin with the phrase, blessed are you, Hashem? So before we were talking about Modim, which is a blessing to Hashem. Now it wants to use this to go to the next topic, which is to talk about other blessings. So, Gemara says, which are the blessings that begin with the phrase, blessed are you, Hashem? And it says, all blessings begin with, blessed are you, Hashem. But if it is a blessing that follows another blessing, such as the later blessings that accompany the recitation of the Shema, and the later blessings of the Shemona Esrei prayer, they do not begin with blessed are you, Hashem. Now, I want to give you a quick point of what's going on here, and we're going to look at the Mara Fulda for a quick explanation. Basically, these blessings that precede the Shema do not begin with blessed are you, nor do any blessings in the Shemona Esrei except for the first one. There's a blessing in the very beginning, but after that you don't have them for. So in the Shemona Esrei you don't have 19 statements of blessed are you Hashem for health, blessed are you Hashem for bringing back the Davidic kingdom, things like that. And so there's a statement in the beginning, and then not anymore at the end. This is the normal and standard way where blessings are done, and also the blessings in the Shema will also be structured this way, so that in the blessing that follows the Shema, where in the morning it'll be Amet ve'yatziv, and at night it'll be emet ve'amuna. It does not begin with blessed are you. And this too is going to be classified as a blessing that follows another, so that, if you have other blessings that come later, they're going to be included in the first time that you said that blessing. And basically says the Haredim about this is that the reason a blessing that follows another does not require the opening clause of blessed are you, like the second blessing after the first blessing, right? Let's say you have a chain of blessings. Let's say you have 4 blessings. So the first one will get this statement of blessed are you, and then the second one won't, third one won't, fourth one won't, as long as they're all in the same subject, or they're all connected to the first one in some way. So if you have a total change of topic, then that might be an exception. Tomorrow we're going to get into some exceptions for it, but this is the basic part of the rule. If you have a chain of blessings, the first statement will cover the next ones. And so you don't need to say the second one, you don't need to say the third one, you don't need to say the fourth one, because you've already done it. Why would you not want to add it again and again and again? Because you don't want to take Hashem's name in vain, and also because you want to keep your prayers as economical as possible, so that you can go and do other mitzvahs. You want to have as many mitzvahs as possible. So if you're spending too much time, then you have less time to learn and to do mitzvahs. So that's part of why we're here. So you want to be economical in your timing, and you want to do it the right way. So basically, the first one is going to get it, and then the other ones will not get it. And the Brisa is now going to question it, and Rabbi Yirmiyah challenged the ruling and said, consider the blessing upon redemption, which we recite during the Pesach Seder after reciting the first 2 chapters of Hallel. This is a blessing that follows another, since it comes after the introduction of the blessing of Hallel, yet it begins with the phrase, blessed are you, Hashem. So what's going on here? So this is a case where before you drink the second cup of wine, we recite the first 2 chapters of Hallel, and then the blessing of redemption. That's a blessing that says, who redeemed us and redeemed our forefathers, our fathers from Egypt. So what's going on here now? There's a custom here, and the Haredim, who's a great Yerushalmi commentator, is going to explain that it was a custom in Eretz Yisrael to preface the recitation of the Hallel during the Pesach Seder with a pre-Hallel blessing, and they would say, blessed are you, Hashem, our God, King of the universe, who has sanctified us with His commandments and has commanded us to complete the Hallel. That's the statement, and this is going to be followed by a recitation of the first 2 chapters of Hallel, where the Exodus is mentioned, which in turn was followed by the blessing of redemption, which is customary nowadays. Now, I want to point out that I'm reciting this in full because I'm trying to teach you the way the text is constructed, and each word here is in a certain order. So I'm not trying to take Hashem's name in vain or say a pointless blessing. The purpose of this is to try to teach the structure of this, because this statement of blessed are you and then Hashem, this is the thing that triggers all of these laws, and so we have to talk about it because this is the thing. So again, I'm not trying to take Hashem's name in vain. And again, we're talking about this blessing that is recited, before, and this is also going to be recited. It could be recited at shul. They can be reciting this at shul. So basically, what's going on here with Rabbi Yirmiyah is he's saying that since the blessings upon redemption complement the opening blessings of Hallel, it should be considered a blessing that follows another. And even though there's a recitation between them, it's no different than the blessing that follows the Shema, which is deemed to follow the blessings that precede the Shema. So that, in other words, this is wondering why the blessing of redemption begins with the phrase, and is wondering about the structure of these other prayers. It's basically asking the question. Now, Gemara is going to answer it, and the Gemara is going to say that the blessing is different. It is not treated as a blessing that follows another. For Rabbi Yochanan said that regarding the Hallel of Pesach Eve, if one heard it from the Shliach Sibor of the congregation in the synagogue, or one recited it there in the synagogue himself after Marav, he has discharged the obligation at night. In other words, says the Pnei Moshe about this, that they composed the blessings upon redemption in this manner because the opening clause is necessary for instances in which it does not follow another blessing. And once composed in this manner, the text remains consistent to be recited even when the blessing does not follow the blessing on Hallel. And that basically what's happening is that the person is saying it in the shul, and so basically he's exempt from reciting the Hallel at the Seder because he's already done it. So really what this is saying is that, even this person presumably does recite Hallel at Seder as everyone else does, but since he's not commanded to do so, he omits the pre-Hallel blessing because he's already done it. He's already dispatched the obligation earlier. Because he's already dispatched the obligation earlier, he doesn't need to go do it because it's already been done. And, this is an instance where, this is a blessing that does not follow another blessing because, it's already done and dispatched in an earlier time. And tomorrow we're going to get into other exceptions and the other rules for the exceptions. But as a basic thing, that if you have a chain of blessings, the first one is going to have the introductory part, and that's going to cover that blessed are you Hashem is going to cover all the other ones except for the cases that come up tomorrow. But that's a basic rule for you to see, and so that when you look at the prayer book, you'll have an idea of the context for why prayers are the way they are, and that you'll also be able to see and understand as archaeological evidence that the prayers that you have today are still the prayers that they had back then, or part of tradition. Have a great day.